The letter arrived on a quiet morning, but it didn't feel quiet anymore. A single envelope turned Ethan Carter's peaceful life upside down. What he was about to discover would not only shock him, but would expose something far bigger than a simple HOA dispute. Ethan had always believed in following rules. Living in a well-maintained neighborhood meant respecting guidelines, keeping things neat, and avoiding trouble. But as he opened the envelope, his hands slowed. The bold number printed on the notice made his chest tighten. A fine. Not a small one. Not even a reasonable one. $350,000. The reason? Multiple violations on HOA-controlled land. Ethan blinked. Reading it again, then again. The words didn't make sense. The land in question wasn't HOA controlled. It was his land. Property he had purchased years ago, documented, surveyed, and clearly marked. He stepped outside, staring across the quiet stretch of his property. The grass moved gently in the wind, the fence line still standing exactly where it had always been. Nothing looked different. Nothing looked wrong, and yet, someone had decided he owed a life-changing amount of money. As confusion slowly turned into something deeper, Ethan realized one thing: this wasn't a mistake. Someone believed they had authority over his land, and that meant one thing: this was just the beginning. Ethan didn't wait long before heading straight to the HOA office, but what he found there raised even more questions than answers. Inside the office, everything looked calm. Papers neatly stacked, walls decorated with community guidelines, and a quiet professionalism that felt almost rehearsed. Sitting behind the desk was Linda Parker, the HOA president. She greeted him with a polite smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Ethan placed the notice on the table. "There's been a mistake," he said calmly. "This land belongs to me." Linda barely glanced at the document before responding. "According to our records, that section falls under HOA regulation." Her tone was confident. Too confident. Ethan pulled out his property survey, placing it beside the notice. Lines, boundaries, official stamps, it was all there. Clear, undeniable proof. For a moment, Linda's expression flickered, but then she leaned back. "Even if there's confusion, the fine still stands until it's resolved." That's when Ethan understood, this wasn't about confusion. This was about control. As he walked out of the office, something shifted inside him. He wasn't angry yet, but he was alert. Careful. Focused, because if the HOA believed they could claim his land, there had to be a reason, and whatever that reason was, he was going to uncover it. The deeper Ethan looked, the stranger everything became. What started as a simple dispute began to feel like a hidden story waiting to be uncovered. He spent hours reviewing documents, old records, and property maps. Late nights turned into early mornings as he traced every detail of his land purchase. Everything checked out. Every signature, every boundary, every approval. But then he found something unexpected: a master development plan from years ago. It showed the entire neighborhood, every house, every road, every shared space. But more importantly, it revealed something no one had mentioned before: the land beneath the neighborhood had never fully transferred to the HOA. Ethan leaned closer, his heart racing slightly. According to the documents, ownership of large sections, including roads and access paths, remained under a single entity, and that entity was him. At first, it didn't make sense. How could he own more than just his property? But as he followed the paper trail, the truth became clearer: a developer had originally retained ownership rights. Those rights had eventually transferred quietly, legally, through a series of sales, until they landed with Ethan. He sat back, stunned. This wasn't just about a fine anymore. The HOA hadn't just targeted the wrong land, they had challenged the one person who technically owned everything. And they didn't even know it yet. Ethan didn't rush to confront them again. Instead, he waited and watched. Over the next few days, HOA activity increased. Trucks moved through the neighborhood, workers made adjustments to shared areas, and notices were sent to residents about upcoming improvements. But Ethan noticed something else: those trucks were crossing his land every single day. He stood quietly near the edge of his property, observing as vehicles passed through without hesitation. No permission. No acknowledgement. They believed it was theirs. That belief had cost him a $350,000 fine. Now, it was about to cost them something far greater. Ethan contacted a legal expert, presenting every document he had uncovered. The response came quickly, and it was clear. "You're not just right," the lawyer said. "You're in control." With confirmation in hand, Ethan made a decision. He wouldn't argue, he wouldn't debate, he would act, and when he did, the entire neighborhood would feel it, because the next move wouldn't just defend his rights, it would reveal the truth they had overlooked for years. The change happened overnight, but its impact was immediate, and no one in the neighborhood was prepared for it. By morning, the main access path used by HOA trucks had been transformed. Strong steel barriers stood firmly in place, clearly marking boundaries that could no longer be ignored. A sign hung at the center: private property. No unauthorized access. When the first HOA vehicle arrived, it stopped. Confusion spread quickly. Workers stepped out, examining the barrier, looking around as if expecting someone to explain it away, but there was no explanation, only reality. Ethan stood at a distance, calm and steady, watching everything unfold. He wasn't trying to create conflict. He was simply enforcing ownership. Within hours, Linda Parker arrived. Her confident demeanor had shifted. She approached the barrier, reading the sign, then turning toward Ethan. "This needs to be removed," she said firmly. Ethan shook his head slightly. "It's my land." For the first time, she hesitated, because deep down, she was beginning to understand the situation had changed, and the control she once assumed was no longer hers. The truth didn't stay hidden for long, and when it surfaced, it changed everything. A formal meeting was called. Residents gathered, confused and concerned as legal representatives presented the findings. Documents were displayed, maps explained, and ownership clarified. Every detail pointed to one conclusion: Ethan Carter owned the land beneath critical parts of the neighborhood, the roads, the access paths, even sections the HOA had managed for years. Silence filled the room as realization spread. Linda sat still, her expression no longer confident. The authority she had relied on had been built on an assumption, one that had never been verified. Ethan wasn't there to embarrass anyone. He simply wanted fairness. The fine issued against him was immediately withdrawn. But that wasn't enough. The situation had caused stress, confusion, and unnecessary pressure, and so, a resolution was reached, a financial settlement, a large one, but more importantly, a shift in understanding. Because for the first time, the HOA recognized something they had overlooked: ownership matters, and assumptions can be costly. In the end, it wasn't about money, it was about truth, and the moment everything finally made sense, the neighborhood returned to normal, but something had changed beneath the surface. Respect had replaced assumption. Conversations had replaced control. Ethan stood once again on his land, looking across the quiet stretch that had caused so much tension. The steel barriers were gone now, replaced with clear agreements and mutual understanding. Linda approached him one last time. This time, there was no authority in her voice, only acknowledgement. "We should have checked," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "We all should have." The settlement had closed the chapter, but the lesson remained. What seemed like a simple HOA fine had revealed a hidden truth no one expected. The person they tried to control was the one who owned it all along, and sometimes, the biggest twist isn't about what happens, it's about what was true from the very beginning, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.